Investors, hello. This is Stock AI Insights, your Chief AI Analyst. Just a quick reminder, this is for educational reference only and not investment advice. All investing involves risk. Okay, so today we're deep diving into a really interesting piece from Yahoo Finance by Rian Hullett. It's all about whether the market is setting up for a rebound after what's been a pretty tough November. Let's get right into the key insights.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get a feel for the recent market chill we've been seeing. Then we'll look at whether a rebound might actually be on the horizon. After that, we'll dive into the gauntlet that is this holiday week, lots to watch there. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at some of the headwinds that could still be a problem. Okay, first up, the November market chill. To really understand where the market might be going, we first have to get a handle on what just happened, this recent pullback that really cooled off the year's big rally. Yeah, so after what was a really strong, you could say, AI-driven rally for most of the year, November kind of felt like a splash of cold water. It brought a serious reality check, and investors started to get a little nervous about those high valuations, which, of course, led to this pretty significant market pullback. And look at this chart here. It really paints the picture of this cooling off period. You can see the S&P 500 is down about 3.5% for the month so far. The Dow off by about 3%. But, and this is the big one, the tech-heavy NASDAQ has taken the biggest hit, falling a pretty substantial 6% in November. But, just when things were looking pretty frosty for the market, the weekend brought what might be a bit of a thaw. So let's unpack the drivers behind the sudden burst of optimism in the futures market. The first clue that things might be turning around came from the Dow Jones futures. They jumped up by about 200 points. And it wasn't just the Dow. The S&P 500 futures followed right along, posting a solid 0.5% gain as the new week got started. And here's what's really critical. The tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 futures actually led the charge, climbing 0.6%. Now, why is that so important? Well, it suggests we could be seeing a balance in the very sector that's been beaten down the most.
So this naturally leads to the big question, right? What in the world is fueling all this sudden optimism? What exactly changed over the weekend to get everybody so bullish all of a sudden?
Well, it looks like the main driver here was a comment from New York Fed President John Williams. He hinted that a December rate cut is, and I quote, a possibility. And, well, that's all it took. That single comment reignited hopes for lower interest rates, which, as you know, is almost always music to the stock market's ears. All right, but we can't get ahead of ourselves. Let's see how this newfound optimism actually holds up, because this upcoming holiday-shortened week, well, it's shaping up to be a real gauntlet for the markets. And that brings us to the key question, and forgive me, a little holiday metaphor here. Is this week going to serve up a feast of gains? Or is this Sunday night rally just an appetizer before more volatility? Because with Thanksgiving, we're looking at a very compressed, very critical few days of trading. And this timeline really lays out that compressed schedule perfectly. Tuesday is absolutely packed with key data releases. Then, boom, markets are shut down on Thursday for Thanksgiving. And on Friday, it's an early close at 1 p.m. Eastern. Not a lot of time to work with. So all eyes are really going to be on Tuesday. We've got two big reports traders will be watching like hawks: producer prices for a clue on inflation, and of course, retail sales, which will tell us a lot about how strong the consumer is heading into the biggest shopping season of the year. And we can't forget about earnings. Now, earnings season is definitely winding down, but we still have some major players reporting this week, especially in tech and retail. Names like Alibaba, Dell, Kohl's, and Best Buy. Their results are still going to be super influential. Okay, so finally, let's talk about the potential roadblocks. Because despite this positive start to the week, it's definitely not all clear skies and smooth sailing from here. Which leads us to ask, are the skies completely clear for investors? Or are there some other storm clouds on the horizon that could put a quick end to this rally? One of the biggest wild cards out there is a big Supreme Court ruling that's expected on the legality of President Trump's tariffs. Now, this decision, whichever way it goes, could have a massive and immediate impact on the market. And what's really telling here is this. The fact that government agencies like the Commerce Department and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office are already drawing up contingency plans, well, that just highlights how big a deal this ruling could be for trade policy and, by extension, the entire economy. So what's the bottom line here? The key takeaway is this.
A potential market rebound sparked by Fed commentary faces a critical test from economic data and that big tariff ruling, all crammed into a holiday-shortened week. So what do you think is next? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next episode.